Hey folks, we're going to do just a quick video about what we call reading with a purpose. We use an acronym. The acronym is TRAMPed. So our common saying is if you fully tramped an article, then you are appropriately and properly doing rhetorical analysis. Now, rhetorical analysis is a doubly important skill because that's the primary focus of the 11th grade English language AP exam, but it's also the essay portion as well as embedded in a lot of the reading portion of the SAT. So the TRAMPed is an acronym for the things that we're going to look for, but they kind of go together. So while it's not necessarily in order, I think the most important thing you could do is identify the main idea and purpose. So the main idea answers the question, what is this article or passage about? And then purpose is, what is the author trying to get out of it? What is his or her end goal? And in order to understand the purpose, we then have to understand the audience, which addresses the question, who is the author trying to reach? So if we can figure out who the author's trying to reach, about what, and for what end goal, then the other stuff kind of fits into how the author is going about this specific task. So identify the audience, identify what the article's about, and identify what the author's purpose is. And then we can kind of look at how the author is trying to achieve that purpose. That's what we call tone. What types of words, what type of message is the author trying to convey with the article in order to achieve that purpose? With tone, we use we use three primary aspects. We use ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is an ethical claim. Pathos is an emotional claim, and logos is a logical claim, to put it in the simplest terms. So we're trying to determine if the author's trying to make it an issue of right versus wrong, or is the author trying to use logical statistics, numbers to prove his or her point, or is the author trying to tug at our heartstrings and get us to react emotionally? Now, the author achieves that tone by using different rhetorical devices. That's a list that I'm going to show you in a second of a whole bunch of different techniques that an author can use. And also the word choice plays into the tone. So why does an author choose specific words? What is his or her purpose for using these words? And then the last thing, this is kind of a fancy word for explication. We sometimes use the term explanation too here. It's basically, when it's all said and done, it's asking the question, what does it all mean? Has the author done his job, and what does it all mean? And if we can do that at the end, after we've kind of determined audience, main idea, purpose, and then we've identified the tone, we've identified any rhetorical devices and interesting diction or word choices that play into the tone, then we can ask ourselves, well, yes, the author's done all this stuff, but has he or she achieved the purpose that he or she set out to do? Okay, so in the packet that's posted for you, there's 50 rhetorical terms. Now, in AP English, if you're in that, you may have gotten one with 500 terms. That's part of this list is part of that. But these are the terms that kind of are most often used. I'm actually more inclined to say you need about 10 or 12. Let's say a dozen. If you can have a dozen rhetorical terms that you know, and more importantly that you understand and can identify in a passage, then that could be your go-to toolbox. And as long as you're citing some, then you're okay. So if you know what an allusion is, a reference to another work, then you're good. if you know what colloquialism is, and this one's used a lot, if you know it means informal conversation, usually appropriate to a geographical area, then good. That's a good one. A euphemism is when we say something in a kinder, nicer way. An easy one to identify. Probably the most easily identifiable rhetorical device is a rhetorical question. It's a question that's asked, but an answer's not expected. Or repetition, where things are repeated, same words, phrases, or ideas for emphasis. You see this a lot too. Refutation or rebuttal, which is when you anticipate the arguments against it and you address it ahead of time. So take a look through this list when you get time and choose about 12 words or so that you think you can easily identify and understand, and then use them within the context of any rhetorical action. Okay, so in your packet there's this speech by Emma Watson. It's a brilliant speech that she delivered in to the UN back in, I think it was 2016, might have been 17, where she was talking about gender equality, and more specifically the he for she movement. The reason I choose this speech for you to practice the rhetorical techniques is it's just got everything. So you can easily identify audience, main idea, and purpose as you read this. And then I want you to kind of dig in and try to see some other rhetorical techniques and see if you can find something. So what I'm going to do is ask you to pause the video, take a little time, and go through that, and then I'll just quickly talk about this speech in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then I'll take a short break, and you can come back and we'll talk about the speech. Okay, so after reading the speech, the audience became kind of apparent. She's talking to the UN, yes, but more specifically, she's talking about talking to the UN, primarily talking to men who are known as ambassadors to the UN, and she is addressing them about the need for men to be part of this mobilized movement of he for she, or men fighting for gender equality. So she has a definite main idea and purpose, and her purpose is to encourage them to be advocates for change. Main idea is to talk about this idea of gender equality, more specifically he for she, and the audience is the UN, but more specifically men. And then she gets into some of her tone main idea, rhetorical devices, and diction. So note the diction. She uses terms of the field, or what we call jargon, throughout. When she calls them advocates, she calls them ambassadors for change. She's kind of commandeering their own position and their own terminology and applying it to her needs. The second thing you might notice is there's several anecdotes where she is talking about stories, particularly that happened to her, in order to prove a point, as well as this parallel structure or parallelism where she's going through when at 8, when at 14, when at 15, when at 18. She's using this growing up a victim of sexual discrimination, and she points out that it's not just women, it's also men. So her tone is very much grounded in ethos, but it is also meant to be inclusive. And she invites them instead of you need to. She says, I invite you today to be an ambassador for change. So she's really using her words and her technique very carefully and trying to be inclusive in tone. And then she kind of shifts right here, and let's kind of take the politics out of it, like her or not. But in 1997, Hillary Clinton made a famous speech in Beijing about women's rights. So she's going to kind of go into now a more Lagos-driven approach. So she's appealed to their their emotions, and now right here she kind of appealed to their ethos of right and wrong, and she then takes the turn into using statistics and pointing out that gender bias is not just a women's issue; it's also a man's issue, and that everybody needs to be involved. And then I love at the end she addresses with a rebuttal, who is this Harry Potter girl, and why is she speaking to the UN? She's anticipating that some people are probably thinking, why do I need to listen to Hermione? I mean, she's just a movie star. And so she addresses that using the technique of rebuttal. And she even brings it to an end with a brilliant rhetorical question. If not me, who? If not now, when? So she challenges them to do something at the end. So all in all, we can then sit back and say, okay, so what does it all mean? And if we can answer that question based on how she structured her argument, then we can say, yes, this is a quality rhetorical piece. Now, that's going to be what you do for your essay, and then you're going to have to respond by writing why it's effective or not. So it's an important task, an important a kind of streamlined technique that we're going to give you, but it'll also come into play with the reading aspect as well. Okay, thanks.